Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Scaling Station podcast. My name is Will Radosky, and today I'm joined by Robert Dell'Osso, the president, principal property manager, and investment real estate advisor with MasterKey Property Management. Robert, how's it going?
I'm good. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, really been looking forward to this. Why don't we start by just, tell me a bit about yourself, about MasterKey, and we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, so MasterKey is based out of the Raleigh, North Carolina area. It's commonly referred to as the Triangle, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. We manage around 500 scattered site, single family residential investment properties. We do some small commercial. We've got a couple of small commercial buildings, nothing big like Class A, but more like strip center type stuff. Primarily residential though. Started in 2016 and grown up to a team of about 10 people now. And we're still growing and looking to grow, and scaling is important to us. I think it should be important to any business. So we are always interested in seeing what good tactics work for scaling businesses and what doesn't work. It's kind of where we are at today. I started it was just me back in 2016 and got my first about 35 properties just using Google AdWords, which can get kind of expensive, right? I think I was paying $1,500 a month or something on that. But we only did that for 1 year, and since then we've invested in some other online pay per leads, but a lot of it's also organic.
And yeah, it seems like you place a large emphasis in MasterKey as a whole with connecting with the local market, whether it's an investor from out of state who wants to learn about Raleigh, or local investors who have, maybe a couple doors or 4 properties. Can you speak just a little about like community, maybe your roots and why the market, or in your case, where you live is important to you?
Sure. Yeah. So when I graduated college in 2000, I was living in Texas where I grew up. I was hired by IBM and they moved me out here, but I had grown up in a family that had always had rental properties. My dad and mom had about a dozen throughout the years, and a couple of small apartment buildings that he had with his parents and his brother. So from a very young age, I grew up going to those, right? Saturday mornings, doing all the work ourselves, painting, changing doorknobs, you name it, right? So I learned a lot, which was very helpful. And not long after moving to North Carolina, I wanted to get some rental properties as well. So I saved up and bought my first one. 2004 is a duplex that I still have today. I call it my love-hate problem child because it's in a really great part of town and it cash flows really well, but it was built in 1946. So whenever there's a repair, it's expensive and it never goes easy like it should. And then over the years got up to, we got 5 rental properties now, my wife and I. So, but buying houses can be expensive, right? So 25% down, that kind of thing. So I decided, I think I can manage really well, and I think I can manage for other people and do it better. Property managers kind of had a bad rep from on and off throughout the years. Is all they do is just cost you a bunch of money and they don't really take care of the properties. So I thought there was a better way to do it, and do it with technology and not having everything, on paper, kind of a paperless office, which everybody thinks is normal now, but in 2016 it wasn't necessarily normal. So I researched some of the property management softwares out there and decided on Appfolio, which we still use to this day because I can do everything in it. And from day one, we've been a paperless office. Everything's done electronically, so we can save money there. You're more organized, that kind of thing. We don't take checks. In North Carolina, we don't have to take checks. In some states, I know you have to, but in here we don't. And so I make everyone pay online through their portal, right? So that way they pay us electronically. There's no the checks in the mail excuse. We pay our owners via direct deposits. They get their money quicker. They get monthly owner statements electronically. They get tens and annual reports electronically. They have an owner portal. It's all done online, which is normal today, but 9-10 years ago it wasn't normal.
Sure. So you kind of led with that tech first approach. Nice. And yeah, I love the story about you as a kid kind of helping out around the projects. What does a typical day look like for you now?
So we also use a software called Lead Simple, and that manages all our processes and create tasks. So, I start my day by checking Lead Simple to see what tasks I have for that day, kind of prioritize them. But of course, checking emails for anything crazy or critical. Touch base with the team. They use Lead Simple for all of our make ready, so I can just kind of check their notes to see what's going on with properties or if they need help with something. A lot of fielding questions from owners or vendors. Most of the tenant questions now are answered by our team, and applicant questions. I still do review applications myself. I think it's important because I'm really strict on tenant screening. So I want to review those and make the decision whether to approve or deny those myself based on our policies. Talking to, touching base with a lot of vendors, depending on the time of year, I may be touching base with my HVAC company a lot when it's really hot or really cold, or plumbing or that kind of thing. Handyman, we do have a handyman on staff now, and I originally hired him because I needed to control the quality and the schedule. When we were smaller and had less doors, we were chasing handyman, but they had other customers they worked with, right? Because they were always chasing jobs. So I couldn't get things fixed quick enough to, in my opinion, it was quick enough. And I think maintenance is important. Doing really well on maintenance directly contributes to minimizing your tenant turnover, right? If they feel the house is being maintained well, you have a higher likelihood they're going to stay longer. Turnover is terrible, right? So nobody's making money when the house is vacant.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It kind of feeds into something that reminds me of our last conversation. Obviously, was it the Triangle area? Is that what
Yep.
it's? Cool. Yeah, obviously a very hot market since kind of the recent boom and the low interest rate cycle and when anyone could get in and cash flow. Are there pricing pressures now, and are turnover, vacancy rates steering investors in different strategies?
We are seeing some pricing pressures right now with rent increases and with what vacant homes are renting for, during the 2020, 2021, 2022, the COVID years and kind of follow on few years after that, you were able to increase rents pretty strong, right? 5, 10, 15%. People paid them. They didn't care. Now it's a lot less. You're looking in our area, 2 to 3% increase, which is, it's not as good as it was, but if you can increase 2 to 3, maybe 4 or 5 a year, I feel like you're doing pretty good. You offset any increases in taxes and insurance. It minimizes your risk of turnover. We're seeing houses sit on the market for 30, 60 days, even 90 days in some cases. They're sitting a lot longer. So we're doing a lot of coaching with owners at renewal time with this data that there's a lot of pricing pressures. If we increase 10, 15, 20%, there's a very high likelihood the tenant will move out. And there's also a very high likelihood that you may not get more in rent than that tenant was paying you. You may have to lower. So don't do it, right? Because if you have a turnover, if they've been there 4 or 5 years, you can expect to paint a house in our area. Our painters charge about $2 a square foot, 1,500 square foot house. That could be $3,000 in paint, plus other associated maintenance. And then, your lost rent, right? What if they're paying $1,800 a month or something, right? And you're out for 2-3 months, 3,600 or more, over $5,000 in lost rent, and you add on other turnover costs, you could be looking at a $10,000 hit. Like what will it take you to make that back? A long time. So keep the tenants in the house, if at all possible.
Yeah. And I think a lot of newer investors especially don't factor in things like vacancy. They'll run a quick back of the napkin calculation with the debt service and the NOI and think they can make something work. Yeah, I think it's really important to kind of educate newer investors and also for them to do their homework and kind of weigh those options or factors in.
Yeah, for sure. And they'll think, some of the newer ones will think we list a house like 3 or 4 weeks before they move out. We'll have a new tenant and they'll move in 3 days after the last one vacates. Well, that's not reality, right? What we see in a market is most tenants don't want to commit to a house unless they absolutely have to, until they can go in and see it in its vacant state and what the move-in condition will be. Because there's a lot of supply out there and there's a lot of new construction. So they don't trust us. Landlords have a history of not being trustworthy. So they don't trust that the house is going to be move-in ready, and they don't want to get some house that's a disaster in their opinion. So they're not going to rent it. And what we're also finding is landlords aren't making the decisions when the house vacates on the turnover work to do quick enough. So we do an inspection, say the day after they move out, and we send over a report and some quotes. They're taking 3, 4, 5, 6 days before they make a decision. And a lot of times we're just back and forth and we're having to coach them. And then the work actually has to be done. So you're looking,
Right.
at a minimum a couple weeks before the house is ready again for a move-in condition.
Yeah.
Sometimes longer.
Yeah, oftentimes those couple weeks can turn into a month or two. You find something in the walls or whatever it may be. Say I am like a brand new, perhaps out of state investor or local. What might be like the benefits of meeting with you before diving into a new market or putting an offer in my local market?
It's good to meet with us because we know which areas and types of houses make good rental properties. And we can explain to them things like, hey, don't buy a six or $700,000 house for a rental property in our market because you're not going to get $4,000 or $5,000 a month in rent. You're probably going to get somewhere in the 2000s, right? Take that six or 700,000 you're going to spend on that one house and buy a couple of smaller houses, maybe in the mid threes, that'll cash flow 1,800 or so, or 1,850 a month. Then you're looking at cash flow of, $3,700 a month versus 2,000 something dollars a month. It's a simple numbers thing there. It's a lot better ROI. We run into a lot of out of state investors who they don't contact us until they're under contract with a house. So by then it's too late, right? And it's a $600,000 or $700,000 house. And, to be brutally honest, I think their realtors are pushing them to these because they get a higher commission. And it's easier for them to do one transaction for $700K versus two transactions for $350K each.
Mm-hmm.
So they're doing a disservice by their clients. They should be coaching them and explaining to them what a better house is for them as an investment. Every realtor out there will say, we work with investors, right? Or whatever the tagline is. Well, sure, they're going to work with anybody, but do they really know what they mean when they're saying that?
Yeah, 1,000%. Of course, good agents, good brokers out there, but I think a lot are kind of chasing the commission.
That's right.
Yeah, you helping with that makes sense. And then kind of in comparing MasterKey to say like a big national brand property management company, what might an owner or an investor, maybe even a tenant feel different in their day to day with the property managed by you guys opposed to, major flag?
Well, then when they reach out to us, they're going to know who they're reaching out to or who's going to contact them back, right? They're not emailing a generic email address. They've got specific people. All of our owners could reach out to me, and people say that's not sustainable, and I don't really care when I hear that. I'm like, if I end up having 2,000 owners, we've got over 350 now, and they want to have my email address, that's perfectly fine, or my business development's email address, that's perfectly fine, because if we properly manage the house, they're not going to reach out to us much, and they don't, right? If we're transparent on things. When you reach out to one of these big national firms, prop tech type firms that they're subbing everything out locally or whatever, they don't, you essentially have to start from scratch every time you call in and explain your situation because they don't know who you are, right? They got 20,000 plus doors that they don't know. So you might, if you really only want to do something based on cost, that may be the way to go, right? And I don't know exactly what they charge, but maybe they're charging, a couple points less than what the local market would charge, and if that's all you care about and you don't want to have to deal with anything and you're never going to contact them, then that maybe works. But if you ever have questions, it's going to be frustrating. And I say that because I've gotten quite a few clients from some of these big national firms, and they say the communication is horrible. I reach out and it's like starting from scratch. They don't know who I am. I'm having to explain, whatever the situation is from scratch every time. Then they say they're going to go off and research, and I don't hear anything back, and I call in again, and they don't know, and I have to start all over, and it's very frustrating for them. So, you can be big as a local firm and still have personalized service.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah, and I definitely agree. This is kind of random, but I was trying to sign in to fix something with my AT&T bill for literally my phone. And I had to input my phone number at least 3 times. It's cool I got a response from some AI bot, but the fact that I had to do it over and over, and it's like a new customer success rep in the past over and over each time is quite annoying.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned a couple of things that are working for you pretty well. Are there any kind of frustrations or like bottlenecks, whether it's industry wide or specific to the firm at this moment?
I would say really the frustrations are how long it's taking to rent a house. We still have a strong local job market, so it's critical that a house looks in top condition. You're competing a lot with new construction. There's a lot of new construction in our area. And that's not to say the new construction doesn't make a good rental, because we get those all the time, and they do. And you typically have very little maintenance in the first year or two. And if you do, then the builder warranty is going to cover, some amount of that or all of it in the first year, sometimes two. So that's good, but you'll pay more for that, right? So for the new construction, the purchase price up front is going to be more. We try to, whether a house is a class C minus house, it's $1,000 a month rental or a $5,000 a month rental, we take care of them all the same. We want everyone to have a nice, clean, well-maintained home, regardless of the price point. And I think that helps for us, but sometimes it's hard to convince owners otherwise, especially on your lower class type homes. Hey, I don't want to spend this money on it because I'm not going to get the money out of it. Well, your house may sit for a while vacant, or may sit for twice as long when it's vacant. And I think the landlords as a whole, if they would take care of the lower end homes a little bit more, it would bring that area up. And so maybe it gets from a class C to a class B or B minus type neighborhood. And with that, you'll actually get corresponding price increases as well. So, and that's not to say all of our owners are like that. Most of them are really good owners. They fit our philosophies. My biggest frustration is when a house turns over and the owner doesn't want to do anything, and we end up having to go our separate ways, because I won't approve listing a house that doesn't meet our standards, because that affects our reputation directly. Because someone will go out there and be like, oh yeah, I went and looked at this house from MasterKey and it was terrible. Like the paint's terrible, the carpet and the flooring's terrible. They're clearly not going to maintain this house. Go somewhere else. So I'll cut an owner loose before I'll list a house that doesn't meet our standards. And I just did one last week, so we do it. I've done two in like the last couple months. But, you'll spend more time dealing with those owners in those houses than you're really going to make off of them anyhow.
Yeah, and I think it's important to keep that standard. Awesome. And you mentioned something kind of I found interesting last time we spoke. And that's that most landlords own between 1 and 4 properties. A lot of the legislation out there kind of implements restrictions that are anti-landlord and almost paints an evil picture of them. But would like to just kind of ask how you think about landlords and if there should be so much, legislation and restrictions to owning a few properties.
I don't know why that some state legislators view landlords as the enemy. Landlords and we are not the enemy. We're providing housing for people who otherwise are unable to purchase their own home. They would never put restrictions on, say, a mortgage company, right? In some states, they've taken away the ability to use credit as a determining factor whether you're going to rent for somebody or not. Well, credit directly correlates to somebody's ability to pay their bills. Try putting that on the mortgage industry in a state and let me know what happens to your housing situation. Every single mortgage company in the country would pull out of that market, and you'd be using hard money or something to buy a house, right? It would destroy it instantly overnight, and they never do that. And the problem is a lot of these politicians, they're politicians. They hear one story from some bad apple, and they want to change the law for the entire state, and that's just stupid. And it happens on both sides of the aisle, all over the country. They need to realize that landlords are they should be partnering with landlords. It should be landlord fair, tenant fair. Yet in some states, even in your state in California, like I get a lot of clients out there because they say, I had a tenant who didn't pay, they stopped paying, and it took me over a year to evict them for non-payment. That's ridiculous, right? Like if you non-pay your mortgage, you're going to get foreclosed on, they're going to boot you out. Simple as that. It should be the same way, right? So in North Carolina, I call it landlord fair. If you don't pay, you're pretty much going to be out within 45 to 60 days. It's not like, hey, I'm going to file on you the next day. I'm going to have court the next day after that, and then you're going to be out by the end of the week. It doesn't work that way. It's typically 10 days, demand. You get your rent's due on the 1st. You have a state mandated grace period till the 5th, so you can send them the 10-day demand on, say, the 6th. And then 10 days later on the 16th, you can file for your eviction, your summary objection. But you may not have a court date for 2 or 3 more weeks after that. And then you go to court. And if it's non-payment, you'll win as long as your paperwork's all in order and you did the right thing and gave proper notice. And then there's a 10-day appeal period where you can't do anything. And if they don't appeal, then you can file for the writ of possession to go do a lockout if you have to, which in my experience is very rare. And then you wait on the sheriff to contact you to set that appointment. That could be another 2 or 3 weeks. So you're looking at 2 months, right? Month and a half to 2 months. I think that's landlord fair, right? If you don't pay, if your rent's $1,800 a month and you don't pay and you get evicted, well, you've got 2 months to go find somewhere that's cheaper. And you can find them because they're out there versus 18 months. So, unfortunately, some states hate landlords, which is the reality. And the ancillary benefit of that for me is we get a lot of clients from those states who just couldn't. They're just selling their property out there and 1031 exchanging them out here in North Carolina. That takes away available housing for renters in a lot of cases in those states, which starts driving costs up, supply and demand.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. I got 2 more questions for you. One being, over the next 6 to 12 months, or maybe June 18th, 2026, what do you kind of envision for MasterKey and any developments over the next year?
I hope to have grown about 20%. We're actually, if not even more, because we just started, we're kicking off. We're kind of reaching out to some other local firms through some CRM system, seeing if anybody is looking to exit the business and be acquired. We'll acquire those doors, right? We won't overpay, but we'll sit down with them and have a no pressure conversation if they want to exit. In a lot of cases, it's a lot of realtors who represented somebody who, when they were buying a house, they're like, yeah, I can manage it for you. And next thing they know, they've got, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 houses are managing it. And it's kind of at the point where like, okay, I don't need to do this anymore because it's too much. Or it's more than they realize, right? It's not easy being a property manager. There is a lot of regulations and rules you have to follow. So those are good acquisition targets for us. And we do have our dedicated business development manager. So she's always pulling in new houses. We'll continue with that. We've revamped our website, revamped the way we do listings in terms of each listing has its own unique URL, which drives more traffic to our website. So we're getting a lot more owner leads, renter leads, all that. So we want to keep growing, right? I'd like to measure growth. So I want to be smart about it. I don't want to go out and buy some firm with 1,000 doors. That's a lot to try to digest, right? That would be pretty hard. But my ideal acquisition target is between, 1 even to 100, 150 doors type firms. I'd like to buy those. I think I can digest those. I've done a couple of them and we can digest them pretty easily and get them all spun up. And then those owners end up being happier with us because they realize how, tech focused we are. They can see all their information. We're very transparent. They can run reports on financials in their owner portal. We have a lot better communication. And so they just end up being happier.
Yeah. Cool. And then before we wrap up, you take your time here, but if someone asked you to sum up MasterKey in one sentence or a statement, what would you say?
We manage homes as if they were one of our own personally owned rental properties, and we'll take care of them at that same level, whether you have 1 house or 20 houses.
Love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Robert. Really enjoyed the conversation. Are you on LinkedIn? Or are there ways any listeners?
Yeah, we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. We have a great COO who happens to be my wife and marketing director who's huge on the socials, and we're driving a lot of traffic through those social media platforms. She has me doing videos, a lot of content. So content, as you know, is king. It can be a kingmaker.
Alrighty. Yeah, you can find more on MasterKeyPM.com or Robert's on LinkedIn. I'll leave some links in the description. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. And most of all, thank you, Robert.
Yeah, thanks, Will. It was great being on.